Hey everyone, it's Lance, and welcome to episode 5 of Central Texas Restorations. Let's just get into it here. So, you saw in the past episodes, I removed the drain pan and the screen and everything. It cleaned it all up. It was really greasy, and cleaned up very nice. I wanted to get it back on so that I could lift the motorcycle up from underneath, from the engine, to remove the wheels and everything else. So new gasket was really all I needed. I ended up just putting everything on, torquing it up. Here I am torquing the drain plug with a new washer, and then we move on to the timing cover. Really not much to do here other than just a little bit of grease on a new seal and put it in. Just have a set of seal drivers there, and this hammer is ridiculous. It didn't feel that big when I pulled it out of the drawer, but it looks like Fred Flintstone, some big Cro-Magnon hammer, but it popped it in nicely. And then I went to heating up the timing cover because it's got to slide over the bearing on the nose of the crank. Just doesn't have to be too hot, but it's a little more warm than you want to grab with your bare hands. And just once it's warm, you can see that bearing on the nose. It slides right over and just pushes on by hand. The timing cover stays on is held on with a combination of some nuts over studs and some 5mm Allen bolts and or 6mm Allen bolts. You can see I didn't paint that cover. That was the one where I just cleaned it up and I sanded the ribs to shine up the aluminum that's exposed, and they look great. In fact, I have the valve covers just sitting on each cylinder head. I just stuck them there once they were painted. They're not bolted on, but they look great, and I don't think it looks too bad. It's a pretty low gloss paint. And like I say, once it heats up, it'll get even less gloss on it. It looks good. And then moving on to the stator, just from sitting so long, it had a lot of surface rust. Not anything terrible, but it had surface rust on. I don't know how much it affects it, but I wanted to clean all that off, so I just used a little wire wheel on the Dremel. And then with the electrical components, it's just a lot easier to douse them with WD-40 and brush them up. It had a pretty good layer of grease on it and just junk from being underneath the cover and sitting there. So, like I say, a bath in WD. It looks like I'm using a lot, but it's really not that much. You brush it up and it looks brand new. It looks fantastic. And I didn't show it here, but I used my wire wheel on my bench grinder to just clean up the outside of it, so there's no real rust on it at all. I didn't really take it apart. My last one I took completely apart because it was even worse, but this one wasn't too bad. And then just hit it with some electromotive cleaner, contact cleaner, just to clean it up. Here I am trying to hold the brake and do a bad job of torquing the rotor, but it finally got torqued. You can see on that last shot and this coming shot, I have some fancy torque wrenches, but I've gotten to where all I use are these two Park Tools torque wrenches, a 1/4 inch and a 3/8 inch, and they're great. I think great quality. I just got them on Amazon. I'll leave a link, but they come out of the bicycle industry, and I use them for bicycles. But now they've replaced, all my other torque wrenches, just because they're so easy to use. I don't know how the bean can got on there without any footage. I guess I'd never filmed it, but it's no big deal. You just pop it in there. I put a new O-ring in it, popped it in there, and put the screws back in. And then when I put things on, I like to immediately put dielectric grease on all the connections just so I don't forget later. And I think it makes a big difference of maintaining a connection, plus, just keeping everything from corroding. And I'm just putting the wiring harness back on where, I just took it off and cleaned it up. This just goes to the stator and the diode board. Same thing, hit all those connections even down inside. I have a little Emery board that I sand them with lightly just to get any corrosion off, and then I hit them with dielectric grease. And then here's a little friction tape that looks just like that tape BMW used. Over time, the tape they used to hold the wiring harness together, the adhesive just goes away, and I put some new tape on it. But that was that. It was getting too hot in the garage, so I went inside into the kitchen, which my wife didn't like, and thought I'd put the carburetors together. I had to order a gasket set for these Mikunis. Again, to remind you, normally this bike would have Bing CV carburetors on it. This one has Mikunis that had been put on by San Jose BMW years ago, and so it was kind of fun to work on. I hadn't worked on a Mikuni carburetor since motocross days in the 70s, and they're so simple and so easy to work on. Unfortunately, somehow I lost the footage of cleaning these carburetors and taking them off the bike. I mean, it was ridiculous how bad they were. I had to soak them in seafoam for 4 days just to get the slide out of the carburetor body. It was that gummed up inside. Everything inside was just completely covered in old varnish. All the jets were completely packed. But everything really, once I cleaned it, and I have a different ultrasonic solution that's just for carburetors, and a little bit smaller ultrasonic cleaner, and I cleaned all the parts in that, and they came out perfect. And then I have a little set of wire drills that go down to just tiny and a little pin vise, and it's real easy to use those to just clean out all the jets. You can get them, right back to new. And but I'm amazed at this carburetor. Looks brand new now. It looks good on camera, but it really looks good in person, so I'm excited with how they turned out. The only thing that you really worry about here is the needle valve and seat, and this had a brass seat, and the needle valve itself was solid stainless steel. It didn't have a rubber tip on it, so there was no groove, there was no anything. So I just used all the original Mikuni parts, the floats, everything. Now those floats, same thing. I had to soak it forever just to get those floats to come off and get the jets to come out. But this carburetor is going to be like new. It'll work perfect. You saw me putting the idle screw and air screw back in. Hopefully it was running correctly in 1995 when it was last run, because I just put the idle's not a big deal, and neither one's a big deal to adjust, but as a starting point I just put them back in same number of turns they were, and then new O-ring on the float bowl drain, or really it's in theory I guess it's the main jet access. I don't know if I've ever taken one out that way. And again, it was ridiculous how gummed up the slide was. It wouldn't even, and like I say, it wouldn't even come out of the bore. Luckily, once I soaked it, no scoring, no lines in the bore, no anything. The carburetor really is fantastic. Put a new gasket on the top, the slide. And last thing, this is just putting a new gasket on the choke. Normally these had a lever choke, but again, BMW choke is up on the handlebars with a cable. And so you saw me a couple episodes ago putting all these parts into Evaporust. The locking screw for the adjuster is actually steel, so I just cleaned it all up. All those parts were amazingly gummed up, and they all took a while to get out, but everything slides freely now. And the spring and the locking screw, I'll have an episode here in a couple times where I'll re-CAD or zinc plate those just so they have some corrosion resistance and looks good. But that's the carburetor. Thanks again for tuning in to episode 5, and keep watching because episode 6 will be out soon, and I appreciate it. Subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments sections. Thanks.